Brilliant. Okay, well, hello everybody. Oh, Mio's just arrived. Hi, Mio. Yep, hello everybody, and welcome to our last session for the time being. And I suppose we can hope this is our last ever Zoom chamber discussion. But as we all know, there are great benefits to it as well. This just endless amounts of time just to look at the notes and think about these things, and you guys have already like made leaps and bounds with this piece that you in some areas that you wouldn't have done at all if life had been normal. So that's really exciting in itself. So we're on to the last movement of this amazing piece, and last time I set you all a bit of homework. Did you do that? Yep. That's great. We'll come to that. And for those people who weren't here at that stage last week, we can enlighten you as to what this exciting bit of homework was. But anyway, so let's dive in. What do you make of this last movement?
It's overwhelming. You go, Lorena, you go.
It seems to be a rondo in the kind of style that there's like a almost folky that it keeps coming back. Yeah.
Julia, what are you about to say?
Well, I was going to say, my first impression of it without actually doing any analysis was, okay, that looks pretty standard. And then you actually go in and really start looking into the depths of what he's done, and it's like mind-boggling.
Yeah. Definitely. Toby, do you have any?
My overall impression is that it's sort of a very extreme version of the kind of motivic stuff he's been doing all through the piece, and it just kind of there's not much material and much theme again, and he just kind of goes through all these keys and then moves it up and then does it again and all sorts of things. So it's I found it actually quite, as a movement, quite tricky to actually get into with just a score without hearing it, because I think usually when you kind of go into that, you can kind of see certain things on the page, whereas this, you kind of have to spend a lot of time actually just like building up the chords and understanding where you are and knowing where you're going to and coming from. So for me, it's slightly confusing on paper, but I can't wait to actually hear what it sounds like.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point, and slightly chimes with what Julia, you were saying about it kind of seeming a little bit innocuous almost on the page. And yeah, there's definitely like a simplicity. I suppose it's maybe a silly thing to say, but just looking at the score as a visual thing, it's not doesn't shout out, this is weird, or this is kind of extreme, like initially at least, does it? I mean, it looks kind of how a quartet probably should look like. And there are like lots of bits where the texture couldn't be more kind of simplistic and classical in not in a derogatory sense, but just like how Haydn would have done something quite simply. Teresa, do you want to add anything?
Yes, well, I haven't heard it, or like, as I said, maybe once in a concert, maybe 10 years ago, but I haven't listened to it. So when I looked at it, I just thought, this looks sort of basic and not a very nice way. But then now, after your homework, when I kept looking at C sharp diminished and A sharp diminished and E sharp diminished, and going through, suddenly it's not basic anymore.
Yeah, let me just interrupt, and just for those who weren't here at the end of last week's session, the homework I set the Jubilee Quartet was to go through this last movement and actually work out what keys we go to. Because I'd always, and through my own laziness, never done the work, but I'd always had the feeling that that there's a chance that we might get to every single key of at least every named note key of the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. But I'd never actually sat down and sort of counted them up, because whenever I sort of thought about doing it, you're in the middle of playing it. And then after playing this piece, the last thing you're going to do is sit down with the score and count keys. Do you want to tell us what the answer was?
Yeah, so we found almost all of them except D flat major that we could not find.
Okay.
Am I right, Julia?
You are, but I just realized before I got on this call that we have C sharp major.
Yeah, we do, don't we? Yeah.
And that is
Okay.
D flat major, basically. But that's the only one that's not actually named. We basically go
C
through
sharp minor as well.
Yeah.
Minor, yeah.
The whole of that middle section, that weird
A lot.
section is that's all C sharp minor, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can like show everybody on the call the lists that I made. I don't know if you'll be able to see it even. Probably not. Too bright? Too
Yeah.
bright.
Do
Oh,
that,
there
there
it is.
Oh yeah,
There.
there we go.
So yeah, they're all of them.
All
Wow.
of them.
Yeah, I mean that's just extraordinary in itself. I mean that's kind of a bit of fun as well, and nobody's going to sit there, at least I hope not, in the concert and tick them off.
Well, I remember hearing it. I think I remember you guys playing it pretty recently at Wigmore, and you don't feel that while you're listening.
Yeah, it's
At
these
all.
imperceptible harmonic shifts, like we were seeing in the slow movement as well, that he manages just to repeat a passage, a semitone lower in a key or high or whatever, in a key that would normally not be possible to just jump to, but he does it, and you don't really realize that you've jumped a key, but you realize emotionally that something else is going on, and that I think is such one more of an array of remarkable things about Schubert, is that he manages to take us to places that on paper seem like he couldn't and shouldn't, but also to sort of trained ears, like with like good kind of harmony skills, like we don't even notice that we're in a different key. We're only aware that there's an emotional thing going on, and I think that is more than any other composer possibly. That's what Schubert is so extraordinary at doing, that you just find yourself in a distant land, and it's the least important thing what that land is. You know, we don't, like, it's absolutely the last thing in the world that we should think about trying to label that land and put a key name on it. Obviously that we can, and then it's really interesting, but in the moment you're just completely taken by the emotional depths that we're glimpsing. Great, so that's a really great beginning to establish something about this movement. I suppose one other kind of ludicrous thing for those of us who don't really play big pieces that much, and we don't play Mahler symphonies, but there's like 707 bars like that. We rarely get into the 700s in bar numbers in pieces. I know that's slightly silly again, but these things give us a glimpse about what is perhaps the most extraordinary thing about this movement is its length. It's just immense, and you could think that it goes on and on and on and on, which maybe Teresa you were hinting at with describing it as being a bit basic, but yeah, it does look like on the page, just like it's page after page after page after, you know, it's like how do we ever escape this piece? And that's, I think, part of the thing is just taking this this dilemma of the piece, is it G major, is it G minor, to a kind of demonic extreme. And it is a sort of tarantella in style. That Schubert liked doing, like doing those things, like the last movement of Death and Maiden is another example of that, and it's just has this kind of whirlwind, wild, inexhaustive kind of energy to it, and that's a big challenge for us as players, I think, and as interpreters, like how to maintain that, and the physically as well. When you play this piece after the previous 3 movements, I mean, the first time you play this piece, you will come off stage and you will not know what's happened to you. Yeah, I really do think you'll be absolutely broken, because it's like physically, I can remember in earlier performances, just my arms just being in pain and just being exhausted, and like moments of this last minute where you can hardly hold the bow because you're just like at the like complete extreme of a physical experience, and it's so fiddly as well, like with the bow technique that this movement requires. It's, I mean, there's nothing really harder than it in some ways. Anyway, we're going to try and simplify it as well, so that you can play it. And I suppose just a side point on that is just that when you play this piece, pacing yourself physically, so like the sport side of it is like a really, really, really important thing. And yeah, and you will just need to work out where you can have breaks and where you can release your body and stuff. Lorena, sorry, you
do, of course, all the repeats, right? Like when you're saying
Yeah.
this is doing everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're just kind of written out.
Yeah.
It's just the first 2 as well, isn't it? But yeah, definitely.
They're long.
I think they are just yeah, because he needs to formally lay out those things twice, because I think it's a sort of sonata rondo, one of these. I mean, if to put a name on it, that the rondo starts and then there's a development. So there's always a development, and then we come back and yeah. I mean, just to put it in its box, like the nice thing about this movement is that it is structurally quite obvious. Like the section breaks are quite clear, and so if you like laid it out on paper, it isn't actually, there's not a sort of unending developing kind of narrative. We do come back, and so like the beginning comes back 3 times, I think, doesn't it? Can't remember. I think it comes back either 2 or 3 times. But those are sort of big like bookmark moments, and that just sort of separates everything. And obviously, when the beginning comes back, then we go off in a different direction. And then there is quite a lot of material repeated, so it kind of does shrink into being something that is doable. this movement, once we get cracking. Right, let's go to the beginning and dive into it a little bit. Tell me what happens at what's going on in these first 4 bars.
Major, minor, G,
Yep.
G minor, G major again, like we've had in the first.
Yeah, it's all a little bit more compact, perhaps.
Compact, yeah.
The changes, he's finding the changes much easier, or at least he's much more adept at making the changes, and they're kind of almost sort of jumping on top of each other, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And we have this like rude interruptions of the minor straight away in the first bar. The dee-dum, but yeah, like straight away diving in. I mean, I suppose we don't know if we're in major or minor at the beginning. I think I always just assume it's major. I don't know why.
Well, the second time, or the repeat bar makes you think it's major, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so maybe you get to know that it's major.
Yeah.
And contour wise, very simple, just goes down and then goes up. Like, it's really, everything is pretty simple. I think it's really important in this to know where you're going shape wise in these quite simple phrase lengths. I mean, it just does open with a 4-bar phrase. I mean, that's pretty simple. And then the next phrase is, I think, 6 bars. So it's extended a little bit, and then there's a little tail, but then things get a little bit complicated, so we'll get to that. Yeah, so bar 3 and 4, there are no accents there. So there's something maybe much more kind of just easy and easy going, that we don't need to sort of, yeah, you need to work out your shape, but maybe we go to the 4th bar, I don't know. It's just something like just a gentle little thing, so you all are moving together basically. This movement is an ensemble, from an ensemble perspective, is very difficult if you try and fit it all together by just working it to fit it. But if you really consider what is musically going on in a very basic way, so just phrase structure basically, and how you navigate the simplest of phrase structures, your life will be much easier straight away. But if you really try and fit every single quaver together, it's doable, but it's kind of it's almost fruitless. Okay, so again, we have these accents, maybe denoting the sort of the stress moments, as in the moments we want to make a little bit more important or shape towards. So particularly that 2nd bar, maybe just showing the fact that it's not at the beginning of the bar, that we want to just emphasize the middle of the bar a little bit. Lorena, did you want to say something?
I wanted to ask you if that sforzando accent plays, do you try to recall to the motif that appears in the first movement? That kind of surprise ta-da that happens.
Yeah, I think I try and make it very rude. Okay. And like a massive interruption. Like I think when they appear generally through the movement, they seem like kind of stopping moments.
Yeah.
So it's like everything's going on, and like there's a lot of this movement that just goes and goes and goes, and like after the first double bar from 16, just going. And so I think when you have the chance to put the brakes on, I think that is what these I think that's what these things are, the accent sforzando thing, that it's actually something to like sort of and then off we go again. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know, like you're being poisoned, like you're trying to just play a nice little finale, and someone, let's just say it's the devil, is there just like kind of grabbing you and not letting you do that. And I think there is that sort of sinister feeling to it, but in a kind of slightly ghoulish way. It's a bit of a horror show, this last movement, I think. Yeah, cool. So then from bar 5, it repeats, but obviously goes to a different place. So so beginning of bar 7 really needs to start at a different place from the beginning of bar 3. So just basic, you would do this automatically in Haydn, but just to state it here clearly, that it's all of that kind of work. We have like it's rhetorical stuff again, basically, isn't it? So you start and you come to this place, okay, one thing, then you start and you go to a different place, and then it develops in a different way. And so we just need to be able to show that in our sound and in the motion and the sort of way we control emphases. So yeah, so the second phrase, already going to slightly cool E flat, hint of sort of E flat, and in a kind of like Neapolitan sort of flavor, perhaps. You just need to start bar 7 as if knowing that you're going to go on for a while. Yeah. Yes. We'll come back to like because rhythmic interplay is a big feature of this, and the offbeat, and what happens on offbeats is something that comes through like obsessively throughout the movement. So I suppose we need to think about what effect that creates. Do you have any ideas about that? Like even from just bar, let's say like bar 8, 9, 10, with what Toby's doing.
It's unsettling, huh? A little bit.
Yeah, it's just unsettling, and it's but a sort of propelling thing as well, that we never, it's all sort of like rolling around in a washing machine or something. It's like constantly tumbling, isn't it? Technically speaking, I think that the main trick, apart from the matching all your shaping and the having a analytical understanding of the movement, is to never be waiting for each other. So like Toby, I don't think you would or need to have the feeling you're but like trying to sort of bounce off a beat. I think things just the whole like character of it kind of flying. I mean, it's pretty fast, this movement. I mean, Allegro assai is not presto, but it's pretty like a speedy Allegro at least. Yeah, I think if you're ever waiting for each other, then nothing's going to work, basically. Yeah, I mean that's a bit easier to do when we can hear what's going on. Yeah, then we have these nice little cadences from 11, dum bum boom, simple little stuff. So I think there's a lot in this movement about the stretching of longer phrases. So you might want to stretch your tempo a bit through 7, 8, 9, 10. And then have a nice little simple cadence. For example, it doesn't have to do that. It can do lots of different things, but there's definitely a bit of a tension release approach you could apply, not just harmonically, but kind of motivically, I suppose, as well. And then we want to fool everyone that from bar 11 we're just finishing and it's back in this innocent world. I think there's a lot emotionally, there's a lot of I think you need to really define the innocent bits of this movement and make them as playful and as childish and as just simple as possible. And so that probably means not being too perfumed in the way you would play a dominant tonic cadence. Yeah, if it's too sort of or something, if it's too clever, then we lose the cleverness of the other stuff. Yeah, so I think we need to be kind of like worrying about something, then oh, it's E5, 5, 1. Yeah, and then 13, we sort of think we're going to repeat it with a little naughtiness with the E flat with Therese, and then this interruption at 14 and 15 as in the whichever of the first or second house, like yeah, it's like a double interruption and a double sort of like scream. Yeah, it's quite schizophrenic, this movement as well, I think, isn't it? And so I think it's hard to underplay these interruptions. Probably want to grade them in some way, but basically I think they want to pretty much be quite outrageous. Yeah, so then you do the repeat and then you come back, and so the second house needs to have maybe a sort of an upgrade feeling. So the first maybe in the first time, then it's like more stuff going on, and then we suddenly find ourselves in B flat major, kind of slightly miraculously again, and then we have sort of just a simple 4-bar phrase, and then we go off somewhere and we have interruptions, which turns it kind of into a 5-bar phrase after that. Well, sorry, this one is less of interruption in 24, more of a sort of link bar, but harmonically it's pretty extreme how that interrupts. Like, how on earth do we get from B flat major to B minor? I mean, it's just like ludicrous, but that is kind of shocking and emotionally unsettling as well, that we're being thrown into places that are already really exotic and foreign, and that we have like really not expecting at all. Yeah, you can do a lot of work at these sections, like from 16, without Teresa. So you really build up, and obviously under tempo, but really build up the simplicity of so just like a 1+, it's a short long on a very small scale. Yeah, but so all of that kind of stuff, so it just becomes second nature, that all you're thinking about through these things is just shape, rather than trying to be rhythmically yeah, because it just, like, trust me, it just won't work. It's just not worth your time. almost would say not even bother getting the metronome out. I mean, perhaps just to check, but I wouldn't try and almost at all in your work do any sort of thing that's overly angular. I would over smooth all of this stuff and cover all the rests. Like I'm talking to Julian, Lorraine, and May mainly, but forget about the rests, because if you stop, you're scuppered. Yeah, so it just has to be that once once that first beat comes, so you just yeah, it's just got to be that just effortless, because at speed it just flies past basically. Yes, and then the second half of that phrase, see the harmony's moving a little bit with a dominant tonic. So again, and you guys, you know all about this stuff, but really present, at least to yourselves, the way the phrases are constructed on the most basic level. Yeah, because actually in a way you could yeah, it's still continuing as short long, isn't it? Short long. Every set pair of bars is like that. Right, then we get this crescendo to a rather terrifying fortissimo. So this needs to be quite extreme. I would do almost all of these things pretty much all on the string, just so we get sound. Okay, so like 25, Julia, you need to be so, like, not taking prisoners, like really brutal in the way that kind of thing is messing up the texture. All of you be careful that you notice where the accents are. So 27, you really need to get to the middle of the bar. It's very easy to yeah, so it's extreme, but he makes it even more wild and praised. And these bars are quite tricky, 31 and 33, to get them together. And yeah, it's hard to sort of give you a trick for it, but you are allowed time around these things, and to manage these subitos, and Julia somehow controls that downbeat on a minute level, because you're the only one not tied. But I think it's more knowing what's going on there, the complexity of it. And then we have forte in 33, and then a subito fortissimo in 34. Quite extreme markings again. And that sort of thing, violins, I think you can be completely on the string with those. The da da ba 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 bum, really just like using the bow. And then you have to switch straight away into the much lower and much quieter, and get back into the world of a longer phrase. 38 again is rather tricky to get together. Make sure 35, sorry, before we jump ahead, 35's only piano, and then you need to do a decrescendo as a pianissimo. There's another bit of information. I mean, just loads of information basically. And then all of this, all of the ties, I am pretty sure that he is wanting ties, not sort of a re-engage. I think some people sometimes do boa a little bit. Personally, I find that just a bit fussy, and not quite sure what it gains. Because this kind of offbeat rhythm thing is such a feature. I think it's fine to not do that. Obviously, you need some amazing color change when you get into 42, harmonically when that opens. And then we think, oh, everything's all right, we're back in the major. And then again, he obviously, like at the beginning, just shuts you down. Then make sure that, make sure when it's forte, it's only forte, because the fortissimos are such kind of like moments in the spotlight that the forte itself can just be quite just a positive open sound. 49 and the upbeat to 49 needs to be absolutely massive. So dum badum pium badum badum. Yeah, so it's like, again, we're getting like double shocks that he first of all changes you to the fortissimo and this just switch the harmony, but then again we repeat this forzando rudeness as well. So all of this, it's just action packed basically. Then you need to stuff like 50. I would do that pretty much on the string as well. I think coming off the string doesn't really work. Not to like be like sort of overly squeezing it, like it can release a little bit, but I think you're just not going to have time to get the bow off the string. There are some moments when it might be fun, but we'll discover those. Like actually just at 60, Teresa, your stuff, like, that stuff can be more light-hearted, but it's the character would encourage you to do that probably anyway. Yes. Big crescendo. All of these crescendos are quite very, very carefully marked. So really just follow the markings throughout them, basically. Because if the forte wasn't written in 56, 55, you probably wouldn't have grown to a forte by that stage. So it's sort of a weird, like you do need to crescendo a bit soon and then have like a turbocharge after it. Then you
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
About the dynamics. Do you think of it trying to aim for a very soft dynamic and then grow from there, or you're aiming for the highest, like the loudest you can go when you just to save energy? I don't know how to.
Oh, from a practical perspective.
Yeah, when you're trying to achieve like getting really dramatic changes of dynamic and still not giving it all in one go.
Well, I think you have to basically be giving it all, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a bit, it's a bit like you just, it kind of possesses you though. So,
okay.
So I don't think you can be, I don't imagine you will be coasting. And in some sort of way, the harder it is to do, the better the impact. I mean, I obviously don't want it to sound a bit rubbish, but we do. But being aware of a human battle or the human difficulty with it, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, we want to try and play it perfectly, but the suffering can be quite a good thing as well. So just to notice as well that this whole passage from 50 to 60 basically that's the kind of the first one of these long build-up things that you will know get longer and longer and longer until we get this enormous one on the like the last page basically, which is like the final resolution of our battle. So maybe just good knowing that that these are kind of become increasingly important and increasingly, just increasingly important. Then you have to snap out of it at 60, at 59. And I think this is a kind of place, we'll have to see when we work it together, but at 59, I think this is definitely a place where you can really finish before Julia and Lorena, you go on. Yeah. And at least I would start off working like that. So dim ba-dum ba-dum ba-da-da-ba-dum. Yeah, so really you can take the time and then just go, but don't do like a bend on it. For some reason it works just to finish, take your time, then go, but go straight off in tempo. Yeah. But you can play around with that, but I would suggest that's a good starting point. And eventually we don't want it to sound like a whole, but I think just to give your brain the space to finish one thing and do the next thing is quite useful. Yes. Yeah, then this is one of these kind of fun, just like easygoing, slightly obsessed, but basically very, very happy and relaxed. Again, it's piano, and then we have a pianissimo. You need to work out for all of these ones how you're going to vary, like once you get to the pianissimo, the major thing and the minor thing. I think it needs to be subtle, and it's maybe more something that makes you hesitate rather than needing to be something that you're doing on it, perhaps. That it's like, it's just a teeny little bit of a kind of like, oh, something's not quite right. And yeah, throughout all of this so far, because this is kind of the end of of our opening statements, like everything, pretty much like the majority of the music that we're going to experience for the next 10 minutes or so has been stated already. And we're definitely getting the idea that G is the home key, because we do come back to it quite a lot and establishing that. Teresa, I haven't said much about like how you might go about playing your tunes. It's hard. I don't want to tell you how to do it, because partly I don't know, because it's not my job, and secondly, I think I think that you'll play this really well, but maybe you just need to constantly enjoy the shape of everything. Like the contour is so playful generally, and like how long we're going down for, how long we're going up for, and then do we come down a little bit and up a little bit, and it's all just but I think you kind of want to pack it full of detail, but also never get bogged down in the detail as well. And I think if the kind of the bubble machine beneath you is working really, really well, then you'll just be carried by it. I mean, we do a load of work in everything, as you know, but like particularly in a movement like this, just the bottom three, to really get that mechanism just so oiled and so effortless. And then Teresa, you can kind of slip into it. But I suppose a lot of it is just being quite on the string and quite sort of heading up towards the upper half of the bow, just so it never becomes rhythmic. It's never just about like rhythmic patterns. So you always have the space in your arm to be able to be expressive and to be to shape things. Yeah, I mean, as you know, that's the main reason why I'm such an advocate of playing on the string in the upper half of the bow, is because it gives you so much more possibility to shape and shade things. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we want to hear as audiences, because obviously it just sounds like a machine. And we know those don't work for music. These grace notes, don't get bogged down by them too much as well. And like, so that's quite difficult at 60. Like Toby, you just need to kind of commit to the bass notes. It can be a little, sometimes a bit of a leap of faith. So whenever the other two have this but you just kind of bounce off them, but also just play it where it has to be. And Teresa, I think they can be quite pronounced, but don't get slow, if that's possible.
Okay. In the Death and the Maiden last movement, I always was like obsessing about like not being able to hear them.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
Yeah. I mean, it's identical stuff, isn't it? I suppose getting them in earlier rather than later is good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like play it without them first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is always repeated note that you play right before, so
Yeah. Maybe it's also encouraging you to sustain a little bit. Yeah, that it's sort of adding a little bit of weight to the bow or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the reality is that the other three are not going to be flexible, because that's not what their music is about there, and also they're really horrible people. But that's they can't budge their once their motor gets going. That's got to be like there. So somehow, but maybe the also you can rush a little bit on the short notes. Yeah, and then you have 2 bars of peace. Yeah. So again, that's giving us quite a cool character. 2 bars of like busyness and a bit of stress, and then 2 bars a bit more calm. Yeah. So we can like always remember this, that we can always turn these little technical difficulties into emotional things, into like emotional successes. Yeah. So something's hard, but let's make that hardness of it a feature of the character. Because he clearly could have just not written the grace notes and it would have had a completely different effect. Yeah. Right. Going on, unless you've got any questions of all that stuff. I mean, this beginning is just great every time you're rehearsing this piece, just to we always do those, this in your parts, the first 2 pages, I think, basically. We always just do that slowly because it just contains everything you need. And so that's something we're constantly oiling, and just really getting the feeling of the opening, the shaping of the opening, how that is just in your arms, basically. Yeah. So just the way that you navigate that, you can't do that enough times, I'd say. Right. Okay, going on. This is quite combative, I would say. And important just to see that Toby has his forzando. So this is in the second time bar. Toby has his forzando, and then the rest of you have an accent in response. So he's probably implying that we want more on the yeah, something defiant, and then the response to that is has a bit of a yearn or something on the accent, and then the next 2 bars, similar thing, but it's lower, so maybe we go a little bit less. I would highly recommend doing that because when this passage comes back, wherever it is, it goes up. Yeah, which is just so dramatic and cool. And if you've set this one up, I mean, people probably won't remember, but you will remember. So yeah, when that comes back, let's just find it.
441.
441, is it?
I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's such a shock. I find every time I play it, I'm just like, whoa, this is pretty extreme. Yeah, so 443 is up rather than down. So I would save what you've got here, and Toby makes 73 quite a lot less than 71. And then obviously it's flipped on its head. Teresa has the strong thing, and then the rest of you respond. These are quite There's quite interesting what you can do with the bow on these things. If you squeeze the accent couplet a bit, then working through the next 4 separate repeated notes. This is one of these places where just because it's got the same marking on each note doesn't mean you need to play it all the same. But so I would I think it's quite nice to feel the so it's sort of like it starts long and then just gets a bit more released. And there are other places a little bit in the kind of similar thing in the towards the end of the first movement, those triplets, the D kind of thing, that they there's a gradual that they change what they're doing throughout them. But I think it's quite nice in the bow, just feel that and then they just sort of they kind of bounce by the end or something. Yeah, and then quite extreme. Actually, yeah, from the second time bar, every bar is like a new chord, so that the harmonic rhythm is on every bar. And then from 79, it's every beat. And look how extreme it is. Toby being sort of relatively ploddy, but then Teresa, you're like insane. This repeated fortsandos, and a hairpin. Julia off the beat, and Lorena sort of off the beat a little bit apart. Yeah, so we have all of these, like everyone is being active. There's someone being very active on every single beat. It's kind of a bit of a cacophony, but you can use these kind of places to really get a radical texture. There's a bit coming up later on where it's even more crazed. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like kind of self-explanatory there, but it's nice, this little link 81 and 82. That maybe that's something a little bit sad, maybe. The descending of that could character-wise of it, and then again this sort of crazed thing, and then quite carefully managed diminuendo or reduction of intensity from 85. First of all, forzando, then a forte piano, then an accent in piano, and then a decrescendo, and then pianissimo, and people dropping out and it going lower. It's quite sort of like clever way what he's doing there. Interesting little bit of a hint into what markings mean. If we all look at 87 and see, Teresa, you have a forte piano written, and then in 88 you don't have a piano written, so that's just a little hint that forte piano actually means play forte then play piano. We're often, yeah, so maybe he's using that marking both as an emphasis and as a dynamic marking. Like often we don't necessarily think forte piano puts us into a new dynamic. I mean, obviously it's going to be different in different places and definitely with different composers, but that's just a little sort of interesting glimpse into some, like a little hint at what he might mean. Right. This is quite interesting when we get to 90 or 91 or whatever, because maybe you can hear it already, but I think definitely when you play it, we feel like when we've reached this D area, I definitely think it feels like we're then going to go back to G major. I think it feels like it's a dominant. And so it's actually quite puzzling when this whole next section starts that we're staying in D major. It's like he hasn't done enough to establish D as the next key. He hasn't done a sort of, we haven't had a glimpse of A major, which would establish that we were definitely in D, because A is we need a dominant to show us that the tonic is the tonic. So that's a little bit of a kind of sort of, he tricks us a little bit. And then Julia starts like, oh, okay, we're going to stay here instead of going off somewhere else. Right, this whole next section is kind of is sort of super playful and quite unlike anything else we've had so far in this movement. Lorena, for those people who have the score, has like the most remarkable job to do for quite a long time. Yeah, I think you just have to kind of be there.
And, am I allowed to be flexible?
Well, let's see what happened. Yeah, probably, because I don't think we should be too like wedded to you having to be kind of this metronome thing. But you might just have to be flexible as well. I think you might not have a choice in it. So we have this funny game in between Julia and Toby, and the playfulness of these accents that you throw across to each other. I find this bit remarkable, but also quite perplexing. I very rarely feel like I really capture those accents in an ideal way. I find them sort of quite elusive because it's so quiet. And do they denote maybe like trying to draw attention, like in the third movement? Are they trying to show us a main voice, or are they just, or should it be a definite conversation between the two of you? Or it's quite odd, and I haven't found an answer yet, which is maybe there isn't an answer, which is fine.
I don't know what I'll feel when I actually get to playing it, but I really see my part as actually like the accents are a little bit different to Julia's, because I feel like Julia's got this kind of sequence thematic material, and I kind of interrupt and sort of take the mic, and then I carry on without these accents, and then I come back to it. So it's kind of a little bit, maybe slightly different, the entrance that I have.
Maybe I've been obsessing too much about interacting with my second violin, but that's interesting, Toby. I think there could be something definitely in that. I think what I'm trying, showing up my issues, my personal issues. I think I'm just saying that really just to say that it's that the game that is going on here is definitely not a clear one. And of course you're often you're just either going up or down. It's like this. It's the piece is so simple. If you like could. The whole quartet has got such simple ideas, doesn't it? That like all this movement melodically or motivically is about just going up and down, being in the major or the minor. Like there's not much more going on with it really. So also we could argue through this passage that nobody is really more important than anyone else. Because Teresa, you sort of have like fragments of a tune. That sort of sounds like the end of a tune. And then again, and then only the next one do you actually start on a strong beat and on the first beat of a phrase as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest in how you, Teresa, can approach how prominent you are throughout this. I have to say though that you're probably just freaking out about what's going to happen 125. I mean, I don't want to spook you, but I think every first violinist in the world is spooked by this passage from 125.
I feel like those triplets in the second violin and the cello parts are sort of like persuading me to change what I'm about to play, because I always start the tune with the lean on the downbeat, but then the third time it's like I'm giving in. because every time the triplets in second violin and cello are supporting the second beat, never the first.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? Yeah. So the fact that your accent is on a downbeat, is that what you're saying? That's
Yeah, the first time, but in second violin and cello, it's always on the
half bar.
Always on the half bar. So then in bar, when I get the high D, and when I go on half bar, what is it, 107 or something?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm giving in to not emphasizing the downbeat.
Yeah, definitely. I think also that is a definite sense of we're all a bit lost and don't know where our downbeats are. Having said that, I think it's quite important that you work out your phrase lengths. Maybe you've done that already, because it is quite interesting how it varies. Like from 93, there's like 8, then there's a 6, then there's a 4, then there's a 4, then a 6, and a 4. I wrote them in my score once upon a time, so that's why I do it really quickly. but and you might disagree as well. But the way that it's constantly changing the length of the phrases or the length of the blocks, I think is quite cool, and also really will affect, I think, Julia and Toby, how much motion or ambitious shape you have through your passages. Particularly the 6-bar ones, like 102 is feels like you're beginning a bend that's going to be able to create the phrase extension. Yeah, great. And then, Teresa, you sort of get, every time you get a bit more angry, maybe not angry, you get a little bit more kind of petulant or something. Yeah, it gets more sort of expanded and extended, doesn't it? And then these da-ba-da-bee, ba-da-ba-dee, ba-da-ba-dee, then you a little bit more impatient, and with your mordant and then da-ba-da-da-dee, these like ridiculous sort of premonitions of what's about to happen. I think always really nice to think how you're going to vary, say 115, 16 and 17, those can be so charming and so sort of, yeah, so they're not, so you're not just doing it automatically. I'm not saying you would, but I'd just be careful.
It's really interesting how the intervals from like 75 are sort of quite near each other, but then more crazy it gets. I keep expanding the octave, and then it's octave after octave. So like 111, 12, and then 13, I get the octave on the loop. Yeah, and then 18 to 20, it's like such a big stretch.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, what happens then afterwards with those arpeggios is like, okay, definitely crazy.
Yeah, so I remember when I first heard this piece on like a CD when I was like 13 or something, I could not quite believe what was going on when we got to this arpeggio thing, and I still every time I get there and experience it, I still can't quite believe that he actually had the audacity to write that. And it's so like utterly wacky, really, and just so extreme. And you three, beneath, I would say that you need to be very calm and just very supportive and not be pushing. And there might be moments when Teresa wants or needs time. I can't remember where we have little things as a sort of trick, but I suppose it depends on each violinist. But really don't push, but don't be too thin as well, so she will feel supported with sound wise. And Teresa, I don't know how you meant to do that.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Next.
Yeah. Then there's a little crescendo, and yeah. So that basically you three don't get too excited in that crescendo. Just get a bit louder. Don't get too involved in what's going on. You will be so excited and like adrenaline buzzing throughout it, but just be calm and just execute it. Yeah. And then this next bit, I would suggest, well, first of all, let's look at it. Amazing suddenly unison. That's quite cool. But it's only forte. And like probably the most basic presentation of two different chord areas, isn't it? And not really, it's not major minor, although the B flat kind of gives us the sense of a G minor tonality, but it's not quite that. I would suggest that the middle two dominate the texture, and that the cello and first violin are more just an impression. And the main thing of importance is that we're always going to the middle of the bar. And it's been so four square for quite a long time. I mean, for like 125. I mean, obviously Teresa's doing her stuff, but if we got rid of Teresa's line there, it would be so kind of just sort of basic. I mean, harmonically, it couldn't be simpler. And then so we finally get released out of it. That's really, really, really important. And yeah, I think sound wise, if you guys in the middle are really enormous, and then Toby and Teresa, you just hardly need to play. And I would be more concerned about the shape you're making than trying to sort of play it well. Otherwise it just gets a bit like sort of muddy and fussy. And then obviously it's quite extreme chords that are going on from like 138, 37, sorry, 36 even. But then this 141 and 2 is like within an instant, just like turning us back into this really, really, really kind of dark, sinister place again, I think. Interesting marking that you've got a hairpin and a crescendo. That's like the beginning of the piece, I think, isn't it? Hairpin and yeah, exactly. So maybe and in some ways it is harking back. I mean, nobody's going to sit here and hear that thing. Oh yeah, that sounds like the beginning of the first. If they do, they shouldn't be allowed in, I think. Should be. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so maybe that just shows you though how the intensity of that, the long note, begins to grow and then flies at the end. Yeah. And in a way, 143 is a release harmonically, and because we really want to get to 145. That's a pretty dark place. And then we get like, I suppose you could say this is like the cousin of what we had earlier. Like from 93. This is the really messed up cousin. And I do really like to make it a lot of things different about it. So maybe back at 93, I'm quite playful and short and and then these I'd really like to be on really long, so but really kind of trying to be as like gluey as possible, and quite radical in the amount of accent. I normally play it far too loud, which I get told off for, so I'd stop doing it. But I think that the piano isn't just a relaxed piano. I sort of think that there's like that we're constantly being like a lid's being kept on the pot. and this nasty thing that Teresa has. It's pretty extreme how naggy that is. And Lorena, again, you've got this sort of like the motoric part, but now all offbeats. I mean, it's pretty wild what's going on. And I think, again, this is one of those places where you don't need to try and actively be fitting everything. If everyone is playing their part with enough character and you know that your larger scale shape, then it will work. But I'm not interested in hearing all 6 eighth notes in the bar lining up. Yeah. And interesting phrase lengths again this time. Like 5 bars, a lot of 5-bar stuff. I think that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Toby, at least you have 5-bar blocks. Yeah, that's quite cool, because we've been very used to 4s, 6s, and 8s in this movement. So there's definitely something brewing, at least. Yeah, and as you can see, everything is just getting a bit more messed up and a bit more crazed. Teresa, your first one, and then your grace notes come back again. And then the extremity of your octave leaps at 154, or from the upbeat. I mean, like, what is that? I mean, it's all pretty out there, the writing. And for someone who was only, like, what's it, 1827 or something when he was writing this, it's like, it's pretty extreme, I think. Yes. I think you then just need to obviously shade the different harmonies. So we start off in this B minor thing, and then we modulate to F sharp halfway through. And then we have this interruption thing which is only forte into 167. That's easy to play too loudly, but you need to get to bar 170. Yeah. And there's an interesting 3-bar little link at 167. Yeah. So that again is just throwing our concept of meter out of the window quite a bit. Quite radical 167. We repeat this motive, the dum-ba-da, and then I think you could be really on the string with your octaves, Teresa, and Julia really, really naggy. And this is a kind of moment when you need to think a lot about your flexibility, because you might feel those 3 bars harmonically we're diminished, aren't we? And the nastiness of the team, and then you can release this thing. Yeah. So I would like, and obviously you can do this completely differently, but I would suggest that those 3 bars can be slower, and then you go faster again. Yeah, you know, oversimplifying it. And then I really want to hear from 170 that we've got again these half-bar accents. Yeah, again, short, long thing going on. Yeah, okay, so like you just see like how much detail there is. I mean, I know you weren't ever gonna like not think about that, but like every single bar has like, there's stuff going on. It's just so detailed. But once we've studied all of that, we can then kind of step back from it. So like in context, I'm only thinking, using this as a case study, about the fact that I've got a 3-bar group, and that it's diminished and nasty, and so I'm really trying to put the brakes on. And then for the 4-bar release, I'm only thinking about where the accents are. Yeah, and everything else kind of takes care of itself, just so we get the variety of that. And the overall effect that this is going to create to the listener is one of something incredibly chaotic and something incredibly fraught, I think. and vivid, but a kind of whirlwind journey that is just like too much. You want people to be a bit like, I think by the end of this movement, people should have some sense like they do not know what they've just witnessed. At least that's what you should aim for. I mean, like that we give them a resolution by the end of the piece, but there's definitely a feeling that they need to be kind of just exposed to some weird stuff. And yeah, this then repeats, obviously in a slightly different key, and now we get the fun extreme bar, which is 181, where you can probably see there is an accent on every single beat. It is like utterly bonkers. And to try and get that across, I mean, and that's for 2 bars as well. And to try and get that across, I'd suggest you basically individually hit every single accent you have and like make it ugly and aggressive and violent, all things that I don't normally encourage. But really just for 2 bars, I think it is an amazing effect if suddenly it's just like this kind of barrage of cannon fire or something. And then then it softens a little bit, 183 and 4. But I mean, this stuff is just a pretty, it's hard to find something more extreme than what's going on through here, like in anywhere in the repertoire, including up to the present day. I think it's so radical what is going on here. And then again, it's this thing, like from 181, it happens 3 times, and the aftermath happens those 2 times. So you just need to then paste those. Probably the 3rd one needs to be the biggest one at 197. I think that probably works. But you also all have this kind of amazingly quick crescendo back into the despair, like 188. It's huge crescendo. Toby, it's quite hard because of coming out of that pedal. I sometimes split the pedal, and I sometimes try and not split it and then kind of do a retake, but whip off the end of the pedal in 188. Yeah. It's a bit annoying. And harmonically, obviously, like it's just wild where we're jumping to and from. Yeah. And then it all subsides. We have a little dim in 201, sorry, 203. Maybe we can think about that a little bit as a rip feeling. Definitely a feeling the music is winding down. Yeah. And also the dim helps Teresa turn her page, I think, if we do a writ. Teresa, I don't know if you've worked anything out, but I know Alex has a really clever system for this last movement, for page turns, or at least maybe he doesn't have a system, because I don't think, maybe there isn't even a possibility to have a system, but he does some like pretty Olympic level page turning. when we play this, and I know there's like a 4-page, I think he has like a 4-page thing out at some point which he needs to turn, and there's loads of flaps and photographs and stuff.
Yeah, and I haven't been working from the part yet. I've just been looking at the score.
Yeah.
But no,
I think basically it's a
I look, there isn't one here, but maybe he does it because there is nowhere else to turn later, so it must be like
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to just have a look at our video on YouTube to watch where he turns when he turns his pages. Only for that. Don't listen to it for anything else. I don't want to impose in the slightest, but you could use that just to check.
Definitely.
Or just ask him. Yeah. So things wind down, and then we get this Ben Mercato thing, which what do you make of this? It's a new thing. What do any of you have any kind of feelings about it?
It's kind of weird that it's in mezzo forte.
Yeah, very good, very good.
But I guess like if we use the dim as a writ, maybe he means it as like almost like a tempo marking again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about the passage as a whole? What are you getting? What sort of vibe are you getting from it?
It kind of sounds a little bit, well, feels to me like a recitativo, a little bit like cadence-like.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of got an ancient feel to it, doesn't it? Quite just yeah, just chords basically. And I find it's a very it's sort of like a very a bit of music within a piece of music. It's like it's quite a formal thing. It feels like this bit is not about. It's a little break from all the tumult of the rest of it, but sort of a cleanser almost. But it's harking back to some other music, and the way that it keeps on trying. Yeah, and so there's this kind of like trying to do something formal to achieve something musically. But I suppose you could say it's a bit of music in a piece of music. Yeah, it's a big debate how much you want to release these whatever they are, dotted minims. That's something to think about. And you just need to again have a very specified journey throughout it that makes sense rhetorically. Careful that the pianos aren't pianissimo, because you do have a pianissimo place. And it's all quite weird how quickly it's over.
Yeah,
that's this sort of schizophrenic thing. Like he lives in like really awful places, and then suddenly just like that is back into the trivial little jolly thing at 2:31. Quite cool thing at the end of this little transition, the 3 Ps. That's quite a remarkable little texture. You can just be absolutely as quiet as you possibly can, and really just disappear off. And then Therese, it's quite confusing your like where your notes are in that link. It's slightly fun thing. We've had on more than one occasion has our second violin not entered at the right time.
Oh no! Yes, it's confusing.
Both being too soon and too late, which is quite amusing.
Oh no.
A lot of false entry, more so even the last one, because it goes on much longer. But yeah, perhaps I've never tried to think about whether it actually is hard and confusing. I think it's maybe at the end that how many of those that you have. Anyway, Julia, that's your job.
Yeah.
Cool. Then going on, we sort of think, okay, fine, familiar territory, but before we've had a chance to get settled, suddenly we're in A flat major. Now, what is all that about? Like, how is that possible? But he sort of eases us in with this decrescendo into it. It's not like a subito thing. So maybe there is scope for a bit of time in 265, just around it, because it's such a the A flat world. I find such a kind of like there's a warmth and a kind of it feels very warm and quite consoling in an optimistic way. And yeah, it's obviously the same thing, but just stuck in A flat this time. Then there's the tail from 275, which I think you could really let peter out, because for me, no matter what the horrors we've already had in this piece, that interruption in 278 is like utterly horrific. And this is one place I do go off the string, particularly those last ones, almost imagining that I was hitting everyone with a timpani strike, and really, I get really aggressive. And then you guys have this conforza written. I mean, it's like, and you get to this point in the piece, and you then, this is really the moment when we realize, okay, this isn't just like a nice finale, that we really, like, we thought we'd had enough in the drama of the stuff we were talking about 5 minutes ago, but now even more. I mean, it's just, yeah, something pretty bad's going on. But we still need to shape. So yeah, so you really have big ups and downs through here. There is a really horrendous dissonance, and I can't quite remember where it is, but maybe is it the beginning of yeah, it's 282, isn't it? It's just in 282, the E natural and the F natural. Yeah, you can really, again, use that kind of thing to have a little flexibility discussion. So maybe we're not too propelled forward. I think one danger about this piece in this movement in general is that it can be overly relentless. So I think it's important to find moments where you can really get stuck, because otherwise it can be almost, if it's too easily going forward the whole time, it can verge on being a bit too virtuosic, which is not what it's about, really, I think, even though that's like mightily impressive, but it's not really, it's not enough. Yes. Then we have this kind of heave in 285. And that can be an enormous breaking point as well. And then you try again, and it's similarly the same sort of result. And then it's quite nice to have a good sense of imitation between the two pairs from 292. So whoever's like, that's the way we do it, like going, the higher note is brought out, but so the pairs cross over. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. And then really relish the softening of it as you go into B major in 296 to 297.
Okay.
And then we have this sort of innocent B major thing. But should we just remember, like, B major is like quite a long way away from A flat major? Yeah, and I think it does feel that throughout this passage. Each of those places feels like, oh, how on earth can we have like suddenly be in that world? And then we fly out of it into C minor, because like, where else would you go from B major but C minor? And this time it's pretty marked up with the accentuation of it. So like, look at Toby, well, sorry, all of you have these fortsandos. I don't think you get them the first time round, whenever is in the wherever it is. Yeah, 25. We've just got accents and Kyles, and here we've got Kyles and accents and fortsandos, and it's it's fortissimo back there, but it's, yeah, fortissimo as well. Again, look at the hairpin going beyond things in 309 to the middle of the bar. And then this one is then stretched through 313. So maybe you need a bit of a low point or a bit of a bend at least. And yeah, then similar kind of written out relaxation, but still quite an intense one. Okay, now we get to this weird middle bit. I've just looked at the time and somehow we've like basically finished. So obviously we've got quite a long way to go, and I'm sorry for like just rabbiting on, but it seems like there's quite a lot of detail in this piece. So maybe this is a good moment to pause it and possibly to compose an email to Chamber Studio to say, guess what, guys?
Guess what?
Other one. But maybe we get to the end in an hour or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But perhaps that's sensible, because there's still, I think it's just worth going through it in this amount of detail.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any questions over any of that?
I have a quick question about the con forza marking that first appears in 280.
Yeah.
You then, like, my instinct is that it only happens there, and that the next it would be a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that's good, Julia. Yeah. The first one is maybe quite sort of like trumpet-like, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-ba-da-bum, and then the next one is higher, so maybe it's a bit more ta-yum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-bum. Yeah, it's a much bit more kind of wailing or something there. I think that's nice. I mean, you could do them the same. That'd be fine. But like, let's not do that if we don't have to.
Can I ask about the Ben Marcato bit?
Yeah.
Would you say that if it just happens to be a little bit suspended in the tempo, then 230 you're like looping back in, going into the D major?
Yes.
Like into an A tempo kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I think that probably does happen automatically. At least
so we feel like guilt-free that it's kind of, because it might probably won't feel a bit like.
Yeah, my feeling is that the Ben Marcato definitely has a more sedentary feel to it. I think it's the one moment where we are just a bit more sort of thoughtful and less involved. And so if it gets slow, that's probably fine. Yeah, you can just let that happen, and yeah, but then and then in the release, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so. However, you come out the so it's maybe over the 2 bars. So the forte piano is the thing that frees you. I think if you linger to it's probably a bit too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you just have an easy 2-bar cadence. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Cool. Let's leave it there then for today. And Julia, do you want to, or whoever, do you want to write to Simon and Richard and just get it sort out again? Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks
John.
everyone for coming. And it looks like we might see some of you next week. Presumably we'll aim for next Sunday again. It's just keep it consistent.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming along.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Stay safe, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
What? Bye, everybody.
See you.
Until I wait.
I think we can just pop off.
And I'm ending. Have a
Yeah.
nice weekend.
Bye. Bye.
See you guys.